I'm an asshole for not leaving my friend's wedding because my sister was in labor. My friend was engaged for 2 years because of COVID, because they had to postpone it a lot. Skipped to a week before the wedding, and we were doing dress shopping and looking for flowers and just looking at bouquets and stuff like that. As my friend is trying them on, my sister's husband called me, and I declined at first, but then he calls me again, so I excuse myself and answer it. He tells me my sister has been feeling ill and faint and has a fever, and that she's going to go to the hospital and was wondering if I could take her since he was out of town and won't be able to come back until the day before her due date, which is supposed to be on New Year's Eve. I told him I can't, but my mom should be able to. After we finished dress shopping, I drove back to my apartment, skipped to the wedding. My friend is walking down the aisle with mascara down her face because she was crying, lots of tears of joy. And I get several texts from my sister saying that she's in labor and needs to go to the hospital now. I jump out and rush to my car and drive to my sister's house to help her. My friend who was getting married came to my apartment and told me that I embarrassed her in front of so many people. I tried to explain what happened, but she just wouldn't listen. So I kicked her out and blocked her and everything.
I told my mom her boyfriend kept trying to molest me and she won't believe me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. Once I was born, my father abandoned my mom and I. So my mom raised me on her own with the help of my grandma. My grandma decided to retire in a different state, so we didn't have her help anymore. This is when my mom started dating a new guy. He was really great. He was definitely a father figure. He took care of me and my mom, and he even had his own son, so we were about the same age. We were like the Brady Bunch. It was the happiest time in my life that I can remember. But soon my stepdad found out that my mother was cheating on him with a neighbor. He would go off to work and my brother and I would go to school. So my mom would have the neighbor come over and they would do whatever they would do. Another one of our neighbors decided to tell my stepdad the truth and he caught them. Quickly divorced my mom and abandoned me too. Because of this, my mom and I definitely have abandonment issues. But it was all my mother's fault from the beginning. She eventually met someone new when I was 16 years old. This man was not like my stepdad. He drank a lot and always invited his friends over. There were always strange grown men in my house. And my mom would constantly tell me to put on clothes before they saw me. But my mom just encouraged them to drink alcohol. Part 2 is up. I told my mom her boyfriend tried to molest me and she won't believe me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. At this point I was 16 and I was growing into my body. I was a teenager going through puberty. My mom's boyfriend would always invite his guy friends over. And anytime I came out of my room, they would make comments about my body and how quickly I was growing. Then my mom would tell me, you need to cover up before they see you. Instead of my mom protecting me and telling these men not to talk to me like that, she was telling me to cover up. So I did. Around my stepdad and his friends, I started wearing really big t-shirts. This led me to become ashamed of the curves that I was growing into. I would even layer sports bras just to flatten my chest. That's around the time my mom's boyfriend started acting strange. Anytime I was in the bathroom, he would always make up excuses as to why he had to come in. And this man would pee in front of me. Even if I was brushing my teeth or taking a shower, he would always try to come in. I obviously started locking my door and I told my mom that I didn't want him to come in when I was in the bathroom. And she would say things like, this is his house. But he didn't pay rent. My mom was the one paying the rent. Oh yeah, and anytime I had my period, he always wanted to know certain details, like how much I bled. But it gets worse. Part 3 is up. I told my mom her boyfriend tried to molest me and she won't believe me. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. Whenever he would start asking me questions about my period, I would automatically shut off. This is around the time where I got my first boyfriend. This is when I made the mistake of telling my mom the truth. She wanted me to invite my new boyfriend over and all she did was strut around in a tube top and shorts. And she kept saying things to him like, wow, you look so big for your age. She completely embarrassed me and my boyfriend actually felt so uncomfortable he went home. After that, my stepdad kept paying more and more attention to me. Anytime I was in my bedroom, he would always look for excuses to come in. He would knock on my door and he'd pretend like he wouldn't hear me say don't come in. And he would come in anyway whenever I was changing. Didn't have a lock on my door, so my boyfriend helped me install it. And when my mom's boyfriend found out, he threatened to beat up my boyfriend. One night he came into my bedroom and tried to touch me. I yelled at the top of my lungs and my mom came in. This woman pretended like nothing had happened. The next day she told me that I was just dreaming. Then she told me that I was just trying to provoke him. I actually ended up moving in with my boyfriend and we got married. Bye, toxic mom.
My best friend, we'll call her Maggie, and I met in freshman year of college. We are now roommates and moved in together 2 years ago. In 2015, my best friend spent spring break a couple states away and matched with a guy on Tinder. When she came back to campus, she immediately told me about him and how amazing he was and how they only went out to dinner once. This was obviously a lie, but that they were talking 24/7. I got super excited and asked to see a pic. That was the only picture of him that she's ever shown me. Over the past 5 years, he's literally been her whole world. She talks about him constantly. She always has her nose in her phone. She gets clingy when he takes too long to text back. She's cried to me a few times because she's looked on his social media and seen he was around other girls. My roommate doesn't have social media herself. I had asked a few times why they never met up again, and she said that they're both too busy and don't have the money for the trip. I even told her that he could stay with us and that would save some money. He sent presents and even flowers on Valentine's Day every year. They've basically been dating this whole time. So yesterday, my roommate picked up his shift at work and was gone. I get a knock on our door and I open it to a guy. He says hi and I give a confused hi, and then he barges in and scoops me up into a hug. He starts saying, I thought you were working. I was hoping your roommate was here so I could surprise you when he got back. and I am so confused. I immediately get down and back away and let him know that I have absolutely no clue what he's talking about. My brain can't even process what's happening. Then he looks confused and says, "Maggie?" And I'm like, "No, that's my roommate." My roommate and I look nothing alike, so I'm even more confused. Then something kind of clicks and I think, oh my god, is this the guy she's been dating? So I say, "Wait, are you Adam?" And he gives me a very slow yes. And I get excited and say, "Oh my god, I bet Maggie is going to flip out. I can't believe you're here." His demeanor completely changes. He asks me what I'm talking about. "I'm Maggie," and I tell him, "No, I'm Summer." At this point, I'm completely missing something that he's just pieced together. He just says, "Holy fuck," and looks like he doesn't know what to say. Eventually, he asks if he can sit down. I invite him in. He then proceeds to tell me for the past 5 years, he's thought he's been talking to me. Every picture he's ever seen of Maggie has actually been pictures of me. I'm completely dumbfounded and we don't know what to say to each other at first. So he gets out his phone and shows me proof. He has tons of pictures of me saved on his phone and went to their messages and showed me proof that she's been sending them to him. I felt and still feel completely sick to my stomach. I get out my phone and show him the real pictures of her. I tell him that maybe they could just talk when she gets off work. And he's really pissed at this point. I say maybe we should call her first and let her know that he's here. So I do that and she starts flipping out, saying she's not coming home. Tells him to leave and that she won't talk to him. He calls her and starts yelling at her over the phone. After everyone calms down, she eventually comes home. He's hurt and accusing. She's crying. I'm sitting there awkwardly. She tells him that she's still the same person he's had feelings for, and he screams at her, "No, I thought I was in love with your roommate." And that completely makes her break down, so I tell him that maybe he should leave for the night and that everyone should have their own space. He agrees, and after he leaves, she goes completely psychotic on me and starts throwing shit around the living room. Tells me she hates me. I start crying. It's a mess. I left to stay with a friend and I haven't been back, so I don't know what's going on. I feel like I have no idea who the person I'm living with is, and I feel weirdly violated. Do I move out? Do I try to call her? She hasn't even texted me once. I don't know how to deal with this situation.
I'm at the asshole for calling my brother's girlfriend a gold digger after she googled the cost of almost all of our Christmas presents. My brother James has a girlfriend, Lindsay, who's been dating for 7 months. He brought her over for Christmas at my house, and they were going to sleep over. I met Lindsay a little bit before this at drinks, and she seemed really nice. When they arrived, Lindsay walked in and complimented my decorations and asked how much they cost. And I just said more than I liked, kind of jokingly, and moved on. Throughout the evening, she asked several questions centered around money, and she kept asking how much my husband paid for our house, and my stepdad how much he made in his previous job. She even googled our art pieces to see how much. It was very uncomfortable, to say the least. And when we asked my brother, he just said it was a normal thing that she did. On Christmas, we all gather around and open our presents, and thankfully she didn't say anything then. However, at lunch, we were making plans for January, and she said loudly she didn't know how we could afford to do anything in January, as she added up the total of our gifts, and then very proudly said the amount. Everyone was silent, and I looked at Lindsay and said, "You are the world's most diligent gold digger." She apologized, and then tried to explain. We just moved on. My brother texted me later saying I really upset her.
This past week, my husband had an emergency and wanted someone to watch our son. He asked my older son and he refused because he was going out with friends. He also asked my daughter, but she locked herself in the room to study. I was at the restaurant with my brother meeting his girlfriend for the first time. My husband ended up taking our son with him to the hospital and his mom watched him from there. He came home and was lashing out on everybody, calling us selfish and unfeeling. I tried to explain that the kids were busy. He scolded me as well, but I told him I couldn't leave lunch with my brother since he was visiting town and this was my only chance to meet his girlfriend. He yelled some more, then told us that he was canceling the family holiday trip for Christmas this year. The 2 older kids were upset and said that it was unfair. I called him unreasonable to cancel the trip and punish the kids and possibly me like that. He refused to discuss it later. Now me and the kids aren't speaking to him and he's saying good riddance. My sister Kat married her husband Mark when she was 21. My interaction with Mark were always kind, respectful, and it's obvious they loved each other. He was a bit of a negative influence on her though, and because of this, Kat, Mark, and our parents didn't get along that well. Kat also used this opportunity to go low contact with our parents, but me and her kept in touch. Mark passed away recently and the funeral is next week. It's a private funeral, so only the people invited can come. Kat invited me and I said I'll be there. I was talking to my mom and she mentioned Kat hadn't invited them to Mark's funeral, and they're hurt, but they're also worried about her. I was surprised and I called Kat later. She said that she didn't want mom and dad there, and I replied they just want to look out for her. Kat got pretty mad at me, so I replied I understand that she's in a lot of grief right now, but if she's going to try to break our family apart, I unfortunately won't be attending. Kat said I was picking sides and she doesn't want me there anyway if I'm going to be like that. She didn't reply to my text afterwards. I'm just sort of caught in the middle, but Kat's angry with me.